Welcome today to Pro Mindset Podcast. This is Craig Domann, your host, and I've got a young man, Brad Snyder, who's going to be our guest today. And I've got to share a lot of information about Brad before I give him an opportunity to respond. Brad is a United States Naval Academy graduate. He was a swim team participant and student athlete, as well as a captain. And after college, he was deployed to Iraq and fought in the Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2008. And then you were deployed again in 2010 in Afghanistan in Operation Enduring Freedom. And that's kind of where your life took a pivot, right, Brad?
Exactly. Yeah, at the halfway point in my Afghanistan deployment. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for joining me today. It's going to be an interesting and motivating and uplifting opportunity for our listeners today. Because your journey is extremely unique. And I'm sure there's been times you wondered why you were on this journey, but this is the opportunity you have to make an impact on people that maybe are thinking they're having a tough day, thinking that they got it kind of tough, okay? So Bradley was injured by an IED in Afghanistan. And in that moment, your life changed. Share with our audience how your life changed.
Yes, real quick, Craig, I just want to say thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to join your podcast here and share my journey. And I think you're right. I do feel a sense of responsibility to share what I went through that year with hopes that maybe the value out of that experience for me is to help others through similarly trying times and bouts of adversity, which I happen to think are somewhat inevitable as we all navigate our life's journeys. On September 7, 2011, as you mentioned, I was an EOD officer in the Navy, which is a fancy way of saying I was a part of the bomb squad. My job was to help our assault platoon either avoid or mitigate explosive hazards. So what I spent most of my time in Afghanistan doing was using a metal detector to look for these IEDs, improvised explosive devices that the Taliban or whatever insurgents there could use, recycled parts to make improvised bombs. So I'd use a metal detector to look for these triggering mechanisms and try to keep everybody safe. On the morning of September 7, 2011, in responding to a previous blast incident, while trying to render aid and get these casualties evacuated safely, I stepped on another IED. Thankfully, I was alone in the blast that hit me. And my life in that moment changed forever. I didn't necessarily know at that moment in time what that form would take. But I remember everything up to the blast. I remember waking up in the immediate after effects, and I could just basically barely see out of my left eye, and I could see my hands and my legs. I could see my body, and nothing really looked amiss. And so what that meant in my mind, I must have died. The only way that I could look unharmed after a big blast like that was I must have died. But then my team was able to come to me, pick me up, move me to where a helicopter came down, and to kind of carry for you how I didn't think that was necessarily a permanent change. I asked a buddy of mine to take a photo of me. He said, "Why?" And I said, "When I get back, I want to know what I look like in this moment in time." And it's funny to think about that now, because I think when I got injured in Afghanistan, I really thought it was kind of like in your world, the NFL. Like I think I thought I blew my Achilles or something, and I was going to be back on the starting lineup here very soon. I didn't know that was basically career ending for me. And moreover, I didn't know that I'd never be able to see again. But that's what began, for all intents and purposes, a 100% life altering transformation. One, on the superficial level, having to learn how to live my life without vision. But secondly, probably the more impactful transition was really coming back to life. I mentioned a moment ago, I thought that I had died as a result of that blast. And I really felt dead for a moment. I really felt like I was passing on to whatever happens after you are here. And I came back from that. And reflecting on that experience has given me this really, really strong fire, this passion to really make the most of everything I have left, because I think I uniquely understand how fleeting it is, how temporary it is, and how precious it is, literally every moment that we have. And I've been on that mission now ever since September 7, 2011.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Well, I want to thank you for serving our country, number one. And number two, most people that have a life-altering experience like that don't bounce back and have more impact after that than they did before. And what you went on to do after that people can recognize you for is participating in the 2012 Paralympics in London and winning some gold medals and a silver medal, going to Brazil, to Rio in 16 and winning a few more gold medals and another silver. So you had 5 gold medals in your pocket and 2 silver medals in swimming before you decided you perhaps needed a greater challenge because one sport wasn't enough. So you decided to do 3 and become a triathlete. So in Tokyo in 2020, you brought home the gold medal for the United States in the 2020 Paralympics. And so you've got 6 gold medals. There's not too many people on the planet that are walking around with 6 gold medals in their pocket.
Yeah.
But the more important thing is, and we talked briefly off air before we started today, that you haven't regained any of your eyesight. No. You are completely in the dark, so to speak. And you've decided to live life to the fullest, regardless of your circumstances, regardless of the hand you were dealt. Share with everyone, where did you get that motivation? What is in you that allowed you to bounce back and to make an impact on people that perhaps you might have done it before, but you're doing it now with more meaning and more passion than ever before?
I think it's a great question. And I think what's in me is just gratitude. And I like to frame it that way because I don't find that I have anything exceptional to bring to the table other than a perspective oriented on gratitude. As I mentioned a moment ago, I really was convinced that I had died in Afghanistan. And so to come back really just felt like I had skipped a loop, I had hacked the system, I'd gone to bonus levels or something along those lines. So it felt more like a gift than anything else. You know, a lot of people looked at that transformation of loss, but for me, it was gain. I gained my life. And secondly, in that line of work, I knew all too well how likely it was that I might lose my life. And in fact, I've lost friends, a number of friends. When I first got to Afghanistan, you know, one of the most impactful things we had to do was we call it a ramp ceremony. When someone loses their life, you know, we load them on the airplane in Afghanistan and they come here to Dover and they go to wherever their family wants to bury them. And we send them out. We send them out from Afghanistan. We render our arms and we stand at attention as they load that coffin onto the airplane. And I did that within a week of being in Afghanistan. Then we did it multiple times. We said goodbye to a lot of friends. And my best friend, Tyler Trahan, from Freetown, Massachusetts, huge New England Patriots fan, was killed outside of Iraq in 2009. And I was there for his funeral. I watched them put that coffin in the ground. I watched them fold that flag and give it to his mom. And that sacrifice is real for me. It's very, very real. And I've felt it. And I said goodbye to Tyler. And I know that in Tyler's mind, he was making that sacrifice willingly so that all of us could live a full life, a whole life, and experience all the goodness that is in our lives, from simple pleasures like a cup of coffee to really rich and deep pleasures like, you know, family time or welcoming a new child to life, that kind of stuff. These are all things that Tyler won't ever get to do, but Tyler gave his life up so that we can do those things. For me, it just feels like a dishonor to my good friend to do anything but make the most of all of these things. Live life to the fullest. Find the joy in everything, from being a dad to being a part of a family to enjoying my time with my friends. I do it for me, but I do it for him. Because he doesn't get to. And again, like, it's not only for that, but it's because the alternative to me also seems horrible. Like just the subscribing to a victim mindset and thinking about how unlucky I was to lose my vision or to build my life paradigm around the fact that I can't see anything just seems like a disservice to my buddy. And I hope that he's smiling at me now, seeing how full my life is. And I tip my cap at him to say, this is partly for you and partly for me. Does it make sense?
Absolutely. I want to dive into the ultimate sacrifice for a second. Living in Colorado Springs, where there's 5 bases and there's so many of my friends are in the military. How do you go to that place when you're in deployment and you're in harm's way, and when you get up every day that this could be it? This could be your last day. How do you willingly do that? Most people would just run the other direction. Most people would, catch an Uber, get a commercial flight, and probably, land somewhere where they wouldn't have to defend anybody. How do you get into that frame of mind to do that?
Before I answer that, I real quick want to say I actually lived in Colorado Springs, right near you, when I was in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. And actually living there was formative in my desire to join the military because of exactly what you just said. The proximity of the bases. Desert Storm and Desert Shield were going on when I was a kid. I remember that stealth fighter was like a new thing when I was a kid, and we went to an air show at Peterson Air Force Base. My dad explained to me the magic of a stealth fighter, and that kind of stuff. I was a real nerd about that kind of stuff, and it really codified my desire to want to join the service, among other things. But you mentioning Colorado Springs makes me think of that. But I think, speaking predominantly for myself, I had a very noble view of what military service was about. 3 out of 4 of my grandparents were all in the Navy in and around World War II. I always grew up with pictures of them in their uniforms on the wall. I grew up with my dad and my grandfather kind of beating into my head this notion that the kind of highest form of your existence is service. The best thing that you can do with your life is to serve others with everything that you have. And I do feel like I'm a relatively smart guy. I'm a relatively physically capable guy. I was a good swimmer in high school. I had good grades. I felt like I had something to bring to the table. And I thought, what better than to dedicate my career to service? If somebody's going to do it, why not me? And I also didn't feel comfortable with the idea of resting on anybody else. I'm an oldest kid, and I felt like it's my I think oldest have a lot of sense of responsibility for their family. And I felt a sense of responsibility for, if someone in my family is going to serve, it's going to be me. And I felt a sense of sort of like, I'm grateful that my family can go on and live whatever life they want to because, I'm serving and my brotherhood is serving. There's a group of us, the 1% or whatever, who go on deployment and protect everybody else so that they can live a life that, isn't affected by things like radical terrorism or, bombings and that sort of stuff. Maybe I can protect them from that. I felt like that was kind of my mentality at the time. So I say all that to say, if you've got a real strong sense of purpose built around service, you absolutely need that. You need that why, so that when you get into that moment of when you wake up and you're like, all right, guys, we're going to get on the helicopter and we're going to go into an IED-laden area and we're probably going to get shot at and all that stuff. And you know that the likelihood of you encountering a lethal threat is very high. You know the why, and you feel the why, and you know why you're doing it. So you're very committed to that. But then at the very, very tactical level, it's almost no different than the way you guys talk about the NFL. Everybody in the NFL has a very, very specific job. You stay in your lane. You do your job. I think Mike Ditka used to say, owners own, coaches coach, players play. And everybody's got a very specific role in that. Our assault team was very similar. Everybody on the assault team had a very specific role to play. And they knew their area very, very well. And in fact, you sort of know that my team's performance really depends on my ability to be the expert that everyone thinks that I am, to fulfill my role, to do my job, to maintain, my zone or whatever else it is. And after you do a couple missions, you're sort of empowered by your team. You don't necessarily feel that as a burden, but you lean on each other. Like, I know my buddy's got my back, And I know that he needs me to do X, Y, and Z. So you feel both empowered to do your job, but also you know that you're protected from the other threats that you can't possibly think of. I worked on a really, really, really good platoon, and we were in some very hairy situations that we navigated with some degree of grace because everybody knew their job and they did their job. And it was sort of like that flow that you talk about, like with the Chiefs. You kind of see this flow that they have where maybe they don't have the sexiest wide receiver room, but they're still able to make stuff work because everybody knows their job and they're executing. So that motivates you. So I think it's a super long answer to the question, but you got to know your why first and foremost. But then you got to really just know your job and know that you're a part of this really well-oiled machine and a great team. And you can lean on your team to get yourself through those really difficult tactical situations.
That's awesome. I didn't serve, but I can feel it and I can hear it and I can feel it, that there's a synergy, there's an energy, there's a power that comes from team. Mm-hmm. And that you're doing it for people, but you're also doing it with people.
Yeah.
And if you had to do it by yourself, it'd be a lot tougher. But when you've got other people that are willing to make the same sacrifice that you are, it gives you more confidence that, you know what, this is worth it.
Right.
Right.
And moreover, they need you. Like, they need you to do this thing. I always felt like I wasn't alone. And I felt like my team needs me and I feel valued. They need me to do this thing for them and keep them safe in this way. So that motivated me to step up. Like, I got to be at the top of my game always because they need this thing that I have, this capability to, mitigate the explosive hazards. And that really motivated me.
Okay, Brad, let's go back. Let's go back to the emotional experience of thinking you died.
Mm.
Okay. And I can't imagine that, and I'm sure a lot of people can't, but you knew something could happen. It did happen. You didn't know what the collateral damage was. You didn't know what body parts were affected.
Mm-hmm.
You just knew that you could barely see your body parts and that you had some level of existence.
Right.
Not necessarily knowing if it was on the other side of this life or not.
Right.
So when you're in that time in place, and then you obviously probably, they probably put you out and you arrive at a hospital and they diagnose what your condition is and do some acute treatment at that time. And you wake up and you find out that what really happened was maybe you have a bruised shoulder, maybe you have some other parts that have since healed, but the major injury is your vision. What was the change in your perspective on life compared to what it was before? Because we all just take our vision for granted. We take our hearing for granted. We take all these functions that we have for granted until it's taken away. Mm-hmm. So what was your pivot in your perspective on life when you couldn't see like you used to see?
It's difficult. It's a difficult question to answer because there was not like an acute moment where all of this sort of came together. It was a confusing set of events that I didn't really fully make sense of for a little while. As I mentioned, part of why I thought that I had died was at least I remember, and it might have been a fabrication in my mind at the time because I was sort of in shock, but I remember just being able to get this glimpse of my body and seeing nothing wrong. And that really had convinced me that I had died. But then I remember shouting to my friends, take a photo because when I get back, I want to know what I look like. So I didn't fully grasp that this was permanent or even that it was extensive at the moment in time I got on the helicopter. But then, like you said, once I got to the hospital, they were very concerned about, I had taken a bunch of debris and frag into my neck and they didn't know if my breathing was going to be okay. So they put a tube down my throat, which is very unpleasant to be awake for. So they put me asleep for a long time, 60 hours. So I was asleep for multiple days, all the time that it took to go from Afghanistan to Germany to Maryland. So I kind of fell asleep in Afghanistan, woke up in the hospital on heavy amounts of pain-killing medication, So I was hallucinating really, really badly for about a week. I was hallucinating so badly that I didn't really fully understand what was going on with me. So when doctors were saying, we're going to do this surgery to hopefully repair your vision, I didn't really understand what they were saying. So that was probably the most pivotal moment, was them explaining to me what's wrong with your eyes. And the exact line they said, it was, hopefully if this last surgery is a success, you have less than 1% chance of being able to perceive light and dark with your right eye. And I was like, less than 1% chance of perceiving light and dark? Like that's not a positive, that's not a positive reality here. What they're saying is I'm not able to see, and I won't be able to see. And that surgery actually wasn't a success. So I don't have any light perception anyway. But I do remember, amidst all of that, there were sort of these conflicting feelings. So on one hand, there was, okay, there's this permanent injury to deal with that is significant and I won't be able to see. But on the other hand was this twofold form of joy. One form of joy was, holy cow, I am still alive. And the second form of joy was, I am so relieved to not have to do that job anymore, which is a really kind of messed up thing to say, because I loved my job and I loved my team. And I thought that that was really probably as good as it was ever going to get, as far as finding my purpose and operating at an elite level and really just being the fullest version of myself. I felt like that was kind of it for the rest of my life. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to do that job forever, but I thought that was as good as it was going to get. But it was insanely stressful, as you alluded to earlier. I knew every mission we went out on, I'm literally waving this stick back and forth looking for bombs. And these bombs are big. And everybody I had seen step on one was in really bad shape. That's very scary to do over and over and over again. And oh, by the way, there's these guys hiding in the trees who are trying to shoot at you. And that's really scary too. And so when I was in the hospital, there was a feeling of like kicking back my feet thinking, holy moly. Well, I can't see, but there's nothing that you can lay in front of me now that's as stressful as Afghanistan was. I promise you. Like that has to be the most stressful thing I will ever have to navigate. And I've also, in the military, there's all kinds of things that you have to figure out that you're maybe unsure of, that you're uncomfortable with, that you don't necessarily know anything about. For example, like jumping out of an aircraft. That's a skill that basically all of us in the special operations community have to learn how to do, how to basically fly through the air, pull a parachute, land safely, so on and so forth. Everything you see at a football game, those guys landing their parachutes on the football field, all of us are capable of doing that. That's not a simple thing. It's not an unscary thing. It's a very scary thing. It's a very unnatural thing. And on day 0 of free fall school, nobody there knows anything about how to safely jump out of an aircraft. But by day 5, everybody in the class is doing backflips on the way to pulling their parachute. So I use that as an example. That's just one skill set of like 100 that us as special operators have to know to be able to successfully go on a deployment and work on a team and conduct our mission. So I'm used to this loop. I'm used to showing up on day 0 and knowing nothing about the particular skill set I'm about to develop. But I'm confident that if I put in the work, by day 5, I'll develop some level of understanding and maybe even mastery of this skill set. So blindness, I looked at like a skill set. This is a thing I don't know anything about, but I guarantee you, I'm not the first blind guy. I'm not going to be the last. There's a whole host of tools, tactics, and techniques that can be used to help, figure it out. There's a blind cane, and there's this iPhone that talks to me, and there's a little color finder thing that tells me what color things are. And eventually I'll be able to get a guide dog who could help me go from point A to point B. Give me the tools, teach me the techniques, and I will master this skill set. And that's how I started into blindness. And that's how I started figuring it out. And then with every new skill, you start off very unconfident and afraid. And as you develop confidence in your new skill set, you start to think, hey, I've got this figured out. And I've been blind now for over a decade. And I can tell you, not for a moment do I ever think of myself as blind. I just do things differently. Does it make sense?
Absolutely. I loved your description of growth, your description of, really learning new skills. Everybody has a day 0 in something. And some people, when it doesn't go great on days 1, 2, 3, they pivot where you just, that day 5, day 25, there's going to be a level of confidence, a level of mastery that you didn't have at day 0. And you just seem to have this patience and almost this fortitude that, hey, I'm going to figure it out. Figuring it out is a lost skill.
Yeah.
But it's an empowering skill. If you can just figure it out. Okay, so you said a couple things there. I want to go back and rehash and dive a little bit deeper. I totally get the joys, the 2 joys. I totally get it. Okay. It's like you come out of your fog, you realize you're alive. Yeah, you can't see, but then you're like, you probably didn't even realize the stress that your body and mind was under when you were in Afghanistan doing that day after day. Of course, you got off days, vacation days, breaks and whatnot. But that's like it's not even comparable to an NFL season. But these guys that come out of the NFL, when the season's over, they're just exhausted and they can't get out of bed for a minute because they've been so disciplined on such a tight schedule, so much pressure. They're scrutinized by the media and everybody else. It doesn't compare to what you had to deal with, but it's the similar concept, right? Where you just like, I needed a break. I need to get away. Okay. So people talk about all the time. I'm going to shift on you for a second. People talk all the time about how when one sense isn't as strong as another, or maybe isn't up to the norm, another sense will step up and compensate. And my wife and I were at a marriage conference this last weekend at the Broadmoor, and there was a psychologist that talked about the idea that there's 2 visions. There's the vision, and it's ironic that I'm interviewing you today, a couple days later. There's the normal vision. It's what you can see. And then they've done experiments where they put an angry person in front of a blind person. They put a happy person and they can see that person. They can feel it. They can feel that energy. How does that apply to your experiences the last 10 years? Have you had a heightened sense of senses in other areas? And can you still see, but maybe in a different form?
Well, that's an interesting question. I like the kind of like the dual vision thesis about the things that we don't realize that we're seeing about the environment around us. I think that at the superficial level, the idea of your senses being heightened is 100% true. You have to perceive and interact with your world somehow, and you only get the 5. And when one of them goes away, you have to find a way to make up for that. And we are very visually led creatures. I think our eyes just give us so much really rich and great detail about the world around us. We tend to be visual about our space, our threat environment, our intimate relationships. They always say like the eyes are the conduit to the soul and all that sort of stuff. So it's a big hit and something to really learn how to adapt to with taking that out of the equation. For me, I think my hearing is the number one thing that helps me map my world, not only from a way of all my technological adaptations are all screen reader technology, taking a visual interface and making it audible through robot talk and all that stuff. But really spatially, in fact, I had an instructor when I was in blind rehabilitation who was a blind guy from birth, and he was teaching me all this stuff about listen to echoes. He would have me sit in rooms and snap my fingers or go into the hospital hallway and tap my cane and listen for the echo. And he would say, tap in the middle of this 4-way intersection and listen. You'll hear 4 different clicks because all these hallways are different lengths. So you're getting the echo at a different time. And it was 100% right. It was like, it felt like magic. But what was even more magical about it is that it was always there. Everybody who has vision, if you closed your eyes and did any of these snap drills, you can do exactly what I do. But I have to pay attention to it in a way I never had to before. So it just was it was a magical experience to remap my world using my vision or using my hearing, and pay attention to things that I had never really noticed because I didn't have to. I was using my vision in that way. On the other level about sort of like the more emotional vision, the being able to connect to people or feeling the world around you without being able to see. I can think of two sort of anecdotes that definitely underscore that, though I've never really thought about it in that way until now. But one, I'm a proud dad of a 2-year-old. I have a 2-year-old daughter named Rooney. She's awesome, and she's my favorite thing in the world. But uh, our relationship is interesting and it's unique, and it's different than her relationship with her mom because her mom can see. But Rooney, from day one, I think, has come to understand that I can't see. And our relationship and the way we communicate is different. There's a whole bunch of examples of things she does to me that are different than the way she is with her mom. Very basic things like when mom goes to wipe her nose, she'll fight and she'll twist and she'll turn her head away. But when I go in to wipe her nose, she'll hold her nose very still so I can do it because she knows that I can't see. Or she'll help me find things on the ground, or she's a little bit more touchy with me. So it's not the same exact thing as the blind person can tell a person's smiling or not, but I feel like the way that I can feel my daughter, I know whether she's happy, I know whether she's upset, I know what she's kind of thinking or looking at or doing just based on her sound or her posture or a lot of other things that are not what I can see. And that's been a cool relationship to see build. And it goes two ways. Her way of communicating to me, she's had to learn a different way because I can't see, just like I've had to learn a different way because I can't see her and she can't see me. So that's been a really incredible thing to kind of go through. And then the other thing, I think, I do a lot of speaking. I do a lot of keynote speeches throughout the year, telling not this level of detail, but I tell my story from getting hurt to going on to the Paralympics and all that. And when I first started speaking, I used to be a terrible public speaker. I hated public speaking. I get so nervous to public speak. In college, I was so nervous about public speaking that, we would sometimes have to report our homework answers in class. And I'd get so nervous just having to say my homework answer was 3 or 5 or whatever. I didn't even want to say 3 or 5 in front of my classmates. My palms would sweat and I'd get so nervous. And I'd just like, please don't call on me. Please don't call on me. Please don't call on me. And now it's funny to think, like, 20 years later, I'm literally a public speaker for life. But as a blind speaker, one of the things that's really challenging is not only putting the content together and delivering a good speech, but kind of understanding your audience and feeling their energy and responding to that energy. And if I can't see them, there's oftentimes throughout my whole speech, I don't know if people are even paying attention anymore. So I started changing the way I do my keynote. I do a lot of, I try to draw on their emotions a lot, and I crack a lot of jokes. And I'm doing the jokes partly because A, I like to keep things light, but B, it's kind of a check. Like, are you guys still paying attention? And to get the crowd to laugh at what I'm talking about is a really kind of good feeling of connection. Like, okay, they're in it. They're in this story with me. They're enjoying it. They're on this emotional roller coaster and so on and so forth. And so that's been the most gratifying thing to me about public speaking, is trying to get people to come along with me on an emotional journey from thinking you've lost your life to then kind of having this pinnacle of achievement on the podium in the Paralympics. And sometimes it's incredible. So like, I just spoke twice in the last 5 days. I did one in Dallas, Texas, and I had a huge crowd, 450 people, and they were really into it. And the energy was amazing. And I felt like after my speech, I was a little emotionally drained because I had really gone through this experience with the crowd. Then I've given others, though, where it's a smaller group and they're maybe not as engaged. And afterward, I kind of leave scratching my head, like, I wonder if I really connected with those people. So I think it's a challenge, and it's a unique kind of aspect of blindness to really try to find a way to connect with people on an emotional level that is not the way we typically connect with people. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. And, we have a unique situation today because we're on video and audio, and you can't see me, but I can see you.
That's right.
And I'm respecting you by not interrupting you, or, I'm trying to let you, give your answers. So you don't know I'm nodding my head about 3/4 of the time. Okay.
Yeah.
So just out of curiosity, what are you feeling from this interview? Just from our conversation, what is the vibe you're getting? Because you can't see me.
Mm-hmm.
What is the vibe you're getting just from us conversing today?
Well, I'm kind of I'm excited. I'm enthused. I think you're asking really good and insightful and deeper questions than maybe a typical keynote or a typical like media interview, and it's giving us a chance to sort of connect on this journey in a from a variety of different standpoints and on a deeper level than is more common. So I really appreciate that. And you're right, there are some struggles with the medium, but I think we've all gotten a little bit more accustomed to engaging with each other through the digital medium, through COVID and on Zoom and all that sort of stuff. So we've gotten a little more used to it. I will say at the beginning of COVID, hopping onto a Zoom and trying to talk with no feedback loop, people are on mute. You don't know if they're actually there. I think that's been disconcerting for all of us. So I think we've all had to learn and develop that skill of engaging through the digital medium. So this is great though. I'm very excited.
Awesome. Well, you've been a great guest. We aren't finished yet, Coach. We're going to keep rolling. Okay, so I have a couple thoughts here. One is that the amazement of your daughter and her ability to perceive her need to connect with you in a different way than she does her mom. To me, that's amazing that she wasn't told that. I'm guessing you didn't tell her you have to hold your nose, hold your head still because I can't find it.
Yeah.
She just knows.
Yeah.
So her intuition, her spirit of connection with you is probably at a higher level than with anybody else, just because of your situation with your vision.
Yeah, it's so cool. And what's really cool about it? Another example of this that's really remarkable to me, and just like you, my mind is blown by it. I observe it and I'm in it, and this is my relationship with her, but I'm just in awe of it. I don't understand where it comes from. But little examples like if I'm looking for something on the ground, and this will drive my wife nuts because sometimes I have this habit of like circling around the thing I'm looking for, like a bottle cap or whatever, and she'll be like, "It's right there," and like I just can't find it. It's right. I know it's right around here somewhere. An adult 9 times out of 10 will pick up the bottle cap and hand it to me, which is a very like reasonable way to solve the problem. But actually, a more appropriate way to solve the problem is to guide my hand to it because it's allowing me the autonomy to learn like that's where the bottle cap is. I can pick it up for myself. It's a very like nuanced and subtle thing, but it is worthwhile. And that actually in blind rehabilitation, they teach people, here's how to help a blind person. You don't just do things for them. You help them do it because you're granting them autonomy, you're respecting their space, and you're allowing them to feel valuable as opposed to just always asking people to do everything for you. Now, my daughter, who is 2 years old, never has ever done the hand the bottle cap thing to me. She's seen me looking for something on the ground, and she'll take my hand and put it on the thing. She's 2 years old. I don't have any idea how she has that intuition, but I'm blown away. And my wife is as well. We talk about this all the time. Where does this girl get it? And I have to check myself. And I know this will resonate with you being a dad, but I know I'm very keenly aware of my dad bias, and I just don't care. I tell everyone, my daughter's amazing, and she's super advanced, and she's going to be president one day, and all of that stuff. But it's really fun being a dad and kind of just watching these sort of, you know this, with a kid, it's like an everyday thing. Every day they do something like miraculous. Where did you learn that? Where did you pick that up? I mean, a lot of times it's struggle and it's challenging and sometimes they're yelling at you, but like literally every day my daughter does something really impressive and I'm always just in awe.
I agree with that. Okay, Brad, I am putting myself in your shoes and I'm up on stage and I can't see my audience. And they, anytime somebody doesn't have some use of some body part, they call it a handicap. So let's just say for sake of discussion that you have a handicap with respect to your vision. And it's not a handicap, but that's what people call it. My challenge to you is take away a sense from your audience. Hand out blindfolds and make them listen to your speech without seeing you and see what happens. Something like that. It just popped in my mind, so I thought I would share it with you.
Yeah,
that
that was cool.
that way you're on a level playing field,
Hmm.
and they can't be looking at their cell phones.
Right,
They can't even be taking notes unless they
right.
can, and so it puts you on the same wavelength as your audience
Yeah,
because you're up there wanting to connect. They have no choice but to connect if they can't see you.
yeah.
They have no choice. Okay, that was my
It'd be
unsolicited
cool. No, no,
perspective
no.
there.
I'm gonna run with that. Wherever I can set that up, like they have this thing called dining in the dark. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's like you can go to a place where they have no lights on, and you have to eat a meal like a blind person would. And the people serving the meals are all blind people, and they'll bring your food to you in the dark. It's supposed to be kind of a fun sort of empathy sort of exercise. It'd be cool to do that for a speech. Like everyone goes in, finds their seats, and they completely shut the lights off. And I go to the stage and give you a speech while you can't see. That would be awesome.
That's the same thing. That would be a great idea. If you could
Yeah.
get it completely dark.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um, you're a person that's been flat on your back in an ICU place in the hospital when they're trying to figure out what's going on. You've been that guy that you've
Hmm.
got all these people poking and prodding, but you've
Yeah.
also been that guy where you've been on the podium of the Olympics and someone is, they're playing the United States national anthem and they're putting a gold medal around your neck. Describe the difference between, I know some of it may be obvious, but just from an emotional level, when you got your first gold medal
Hmm.
in London, what was like your sense of purpose, sense of satisfaction, sense of accomplishment, sense of I did it, I came back? It was apparently 1 year after
Hmm.
your injury. I
Hmm.
mean, you didn't waste time. You didn't, toil in the pity room. You jumped right in the pool in rehab and you end up an Olympian with the gold medal. So what
Hmm.
was that like to have that, 180?
So I think it's interesting you juxtapose those two experiences from being sort of in the ICU to being on the podium. And when I think of that, those two side by side, both are 100% characterized by a feeling of connection to the people around me. In the ICU, there's nothing like, for me, the thing that comes to my mind is like, you'll never know who your friends are until you have to go through that. And I remember being so like, it was a mix of both embarrassed, but also grateful. One of the things, I was on so many medications, I actually couldn't like move very much. I wasn't paralyzed, but I didn't have a lot of control over my body. And this is going to sound gross and maybe TMI, but like you don't shower while you're in that environment. You're just kind of laying in this bed for a prolonged period of time. So what they do is they basically like wipe you down with baby wipes at the end of every day. And I remember I have this very, very vivid memory of like my two best friends, Nick and Ian, who I'd known for a very long time, who were just visiting me in the hospital. And for whatever reason, they needed help getting me out of this bed to wipe me down in the ICU. And I remember like kind of being present for that moment and thinking, I'm so embarrassed that my two friends have to basically baby wipe me because I can't clean myself. But at the same time, I was so grateful to have people in my life like them who are willing to just with no hesitation jump in and say, this is what needs to be done. No judgment, no anything other than let's do this thing for our friend because he's hurt and he's down. So, I mean, that's just a really poignant memory I have from that instance, and just thinking, the rehab environment was very humbling, but I only really got through it because I was constantly surrounded by these great people who were willing to be there for me and with me during that instance, which gets to the podium, which is exactly what I was thinking on the podium. I tell this in the keynote. Any idea or narrative or kind of like pat on the back about how great I was extremely short. They put the medal around my neck and they announced my name, but immediately afterward, they play the anthem, like you said. And every thought in my mind was about how grateful I was to have such a remarkable group of people who were there to help me at the right times. From my buddies on the battlefield who, picked me up when I was hurt and got me on a helicopter, where the pilot and the flight crew and they all picked me up and took me to the hospital, where there was a surgeon and a staff who put me back together, to my mom, to my brothers, to my buddies Nick and Ian, to my coaches, to all the people in the arena, to people watching the live stream. I felt very small, but very connected and very grateful for all of those people who had big and small roles in me being there. And I feel to this day, like I carry the medals. By the way, they're not in my pocket, but they're not far. But I carry them with me when I travel, and I share it because it's all of ours. Like everybody here in the U.S. and so many people who have affected my life in a variety of ways. I am who I am because of all of those little interactions I've had throughout the years. In little ways, all the rehab technicians and therapists and nurses and my buddies and all my teammates. All of those experiences have aggregated into who I am. So every time I win, the credit belongs to everybody else just as much as it does to me. So again, the answer to your question, I think both of those highs and lows, you get through the lows because of the people around you. And when you get to the highs, you celebrate with those around you because you guys have ridden the whole wave together. Does that make sense?
No question. It's as if the extremes, there's an immense amount of patriotism in both extremes.
Yeah, for sure.
I've cried at times when they did the national anthem, when there was someone that won a medal, and I was just so connected because of their story. And the media does such a wonderful job of sharing stories about the Olympians and all the things they overcome. And obviously, everybody in the Paralympics has overcome something, or they wouldn't be in the Paralympics.
Right.
But even the people in the regular Olympics, they all have done that too. They've all had to overcome something.
Right.
And so sometimes it kind of hits a nerve.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the things that you talk about in your keynote, I'm supposing, is the idea that we have self-imposed limitations that put glass ceilings on our potential as humans. That when you go through what you went through, you really shatter those glass ceilings. And you show that you have a lot more potential than what perhaps you thought before were limitations.
Right.
Share with our audience how that applies to you.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think the theme I try to drive home is that I don't feel exceptional in any way, shape, or form. I'm 5'9". I weigh about 155 pounds. I wear like literally medium t-shirts. I'm very average across every aspect of my being. But I live this exceptional life now. I have I don't know, I'm not like Taylor Swift or anything, but I have some following. People are interested in what I have to say.
Hey, I've got news for you, bro. You don't look like Taylor Swift, okay?
That's right.
So,
try as I might.
Okay.
But I do keynotes, and I think that I have, I have a platform to speak from, and I've been able to achieve some things, some gold medals, and some that kind of stuff. It's not because of anything. It's not because of an exceptional talent. It's not because I have some kind of innate thing that other people don't have. It's because I've been really fortunate. It's because I have a great group of people around me. And I think I've made choices that have led me to success. And I think what I'm trying to get at here is everything that I have done or that I've tried to achieve or that I try to put out there is 100% accessible to everybody else. It's exactly what you just said. I think a lot of people will look at my story and say, "Oh, that doesn't happen to me, and he's not me, and he's something that I'm not." What I'm trying to say is, I am you. I am everybody who's listening to this podcast. If you make a certain set of choices and you hold yourself to account to be orient yourself towards a growth mindset and to challenge yourself and to set scary goals and to take risks and to be vulnerable. All of these things that we talk about on podcasts like this, if you adopt all of those and you dedicate yourself to those things and you habituate those things, then I believe that some form of exceptional success is yours for the taking as well. It's 100% what you said. A lot of us like to create comfortable boundaries for ourselves, and we don't necessarily want to take risks, and we want to live a stable and somewhat comfortable life. But stability and comfort is not how you achieve exceptional success. So for those who really want to achieve something great, you got to dare, you got to step outside of your comfort zone. You have to be a little bit scared. You have to, face uncertainty with some level of courage, take some risks, be vulnerable, and hold yourself to account, and all that sort of stuff. I try to talk about all that sort of stuff, and I think I've done a number of those things, and I think it's really showed its value to me in my life. And now I'm trying to not only do that for myself on an ongoing basis, but speak openly about how those things have helped me along the way, and with hopes that other people will adopt some of those principles to unlock their success, much like you're doing with your podcast and all your work.
No, you put that out there very, very eloquently. Men especially like comfort. We like easy. We like easy. Yeah. We like shortcuts. We like hacks. We don't want to follow the rules. We want the stop sign says stop for everybody but my name. Okay, I can keep going, but everybody else has got to stop. Yes. And I think, right, that's the mindset that we get, and being around and representing and being friends with professional athletes my entire adult life. People do sometimes give those guys preferential treatment, and you start thinking you should be treated like that because they're treated like that, and it's like that's not how we should be treated, right? And I think that guys don't want to do the hard stuff, but the joy is on the other side of hard. It always is. Guys that do the military, you have a lot of friends from high school that probably, were like, are you sure you want to go to the Naval Academy? That's going to be kind of tough, and it's like the joy is in the hard.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Okay. I don't know if you're a man of faith, but I can only imagine that something greater than you, some power greater than you, had some influence on your recovery, on your on finding your purpose after your accident. Would you mind sharing what that is?
Yeah, I think for me, I've never really known what to put my faith in exactly. But from a very early age, I was really beneficial, or I benefited from a really strong and firm example of who I wanted to be from my grandfather. My grandfather was an incredibly good guy, a really respected guy. He had achieved quite a bit in his life. He served in World War II. He survived a plane crash. He was really badly injured. He spent 4 years in the hospital recovering from his wounds. All of that time he spent hitting on his nurse, who eventually became his wife and my grandmother. He went on to get college degrees and had a teaching career and then an engineering career and all these sorts of things. And I remember spending a lot of time with him when I was little. And before I knew I wanted to join the military or what I wanted to do when I grew up, I knew I wanted to be like my grandfather. And so I patterned much of my life off of him, and he died when I was 11. But I've always kept him with me as like a check on what am I doing? Am I doing something? Would my grandfather be proud of what I'm doing? Would my dad be proud of what I'm doing? But I bring up my grandfather probably more so than my dad because I really felt my grandfather when I thought I was dead. When I thought I was dead, I felt him there. And I was convinced that he was going to come and take me across to whatever happens after you die. But I didn't. And somehow I feel like he had a role in me coming back. Maybe it wasn't my time. Maybe he put in a good word with the guy upstairs for me or something along those lines. But I felt him there, and I felt him with me throughout my rehab. And I've felt him all along the way. So I don't know if that's a stab at the answer to your question. Is I've always kind of kept my ghosts with me, my grandfather, my dad, my buddy Tyler, and I feel like when I'm down, they're there, and I can look for them. I can look to them for support. When I'm up, I nod at them, and I hope that they're proud of when I'm up. But I always keep them with me to make sure that I'm on the right track. And so long as I'm here, I hope that they know I'm grateful. I'm grateful for every moment that I'm here, and I'm going to make the most of it because I know that none of them have anymore. My grandfather's not here anymore. My dad's not here anymore. Tyler's not here anymore. So I'm going to make the most of every moment I have left. And when I pass on, I'm really looking forward to seeing them all on the other side.
Amen. Family. You've got your lovely 2-year-old daughter. I'm sure you have a lovely wife. Why don't you share with us how she's walked beside you on this journey and adapted to your situation?
Yeah, so Sarah, my wife, not only walks beside me, but really the lead up to the Tokyo Games, I owe much to her. When we first started dating in 2018, so it was after Rio, it was before Tokyo, and we sort of fell in love with each other while I was on this mission to go to the Tokyo Games as a triathlete. I remember early in our relationship, she was over at my house, and I said, "All right, I'll see you in a bit. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go work out." And she said, "No, I'll come with you." And I was kind of, maybe this was an arrogant thing to think, but I was like, "No, you don't want to work out with me. I'm going to do this like freakishly long workout that's really annoying. Like you don't want, no, most people don't want to work out like the way that I work out. It's like, you don't want to work out with me." And she said, "No, I will." And I said, "All right, I'm going to do this 2.5 hour thing on the bike, and I'm going to do these intervals. And then after this, I'm going to do that and the other thing." And she said, "Yeah, sure. I'll do that with you too." And I looked at her like, "You're out of your mind. Why would you want to do this with me?" And so she started. And every time I went down and worked out, she was right there with me. If I was on the bike, she would do the treadmill. If I was on the treadmill, she was on the bike. And we started doing all of that together. She has no background in triathlon, had never run even a 5K before, to my knowledge, but yet wanted to do all of that training with me, and still has to this day has never raced, but she did all of that training. And then when COVID happened, our lives got complicated like everybody's lives did. And there were a number of times based on extra stressors in my life and everything that was going on with the pandemic, I had kind of said, "Sarah, I think this is ridiculous. I think it's probably time I just tossed it in and retired and called it a day." And she's the one who kind of held me accountable for what I had said that I was. I wanted to try a different sport. I wanted to prove that it's about process and not outcome. I wanted to prove that I was a great blind athlete outside of the sport of swimming. I wanted to demonstrate and show an example for other people how you can go through that growth loop like you had talked about from day 0 to day 25 and start at the bottom and work your way up and all these sorts of things that I say all the time. She held me to account and said, "Are you that person? And do you want to achieve those things? Do you want to model those things?" And I said, yes. And so I didn't quit. And because I didn't quit, I was able to go to those games. And even though I was on the outside looking in, I thought at making even the team, I ended up winning that race. And so not only did I owe much to her on that journey towards that medal, but also right before I left for Tokyo, we found out she was pregnant. And only she, me, and my guide, Greg, knew about my daughter at that stage, because you know this, like in the first trimester, you're not really supposed to talk about it because of the risk of miscarriage. So we kept it a secret. But when I came across the finish line in Tokyo, I knew that my wife and I were about to embark on this really new and exciting journey of being parents. So the Tokyo journey was really all about her. I'm very grateful for her kind of keeping me in that fight and holding me accountable to who I say that I am. But then also, she's just an incredible partner to be parents with. Some of our intuitions are not always aligned, but what the result of that is all of our parenting is very intentional. We're very invested in Rooney and all the ways that we can empower her to succeed. And I'm very grateful to be on this journey with her among anybody else.
Well, you described your wife, Sarah, as she started out as a training partner. She became an accountability partner.
Uh-huh.
And now she's a parenting partner and a life partner.
for
So
sure. She's a partner in every sense.
She's got she wears lots of hats.
Yeah. And I don't know that I always give her credit for all of that, because we're only ever wearing one hat at a time. But I should really kind of call to effect that I'm grateful that she wears so many hats.
Well, she probably makes you look good every day too. So you got to give her some credit for, being like your image.
Yeah, I think
image
so.
person,
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think so. And well, she does a good job of looking good for the both of us. She's a really good looking gal, so she does.
Well, that's good to know. Okay, this might be my last question. Who's your favorite NFL team? Just out of curiosity.
I root for two teams. I'm from Tampa Bay, and I'm a Tampa Bay guy from a long time ago with the creamsicle and orange, and I've ridden the waves there. And then I'm also now an avid Baltimore Ravens fan. I live here. I went to the Texans game that we won. I stayed home for the Chiefs game, which I now regret, and now I've committed that for all the Ravens games that they make the playoffs next year, I'll have to go because I felt responsible for the loss in a way.
I'm a Chiefs. I'm impartial many times, but if I don't have a horse in the race, I'm a Chiefs fan. I grew up near Kansas City, so I'm a Kansas City Chiefs fan.
Yeah,
so it's been.
I saw that in your background, and I'll tell you, I have a lot of respect for Patrick Mahomes, and I have a lot of respect for Chris Jones, and I think that team was and Andy Reid for that matter. I think that was a remarkable team, and that was an incredible game. And that guy is just magic, Patrick Mahomes. He is just magic. That is really impressive.
Okay, this is going to be my last question. How in the heck do you experience and visualize the games when you're blind?
That's a great question, and it's been a challenge. But this is not a paid app, by the way. Not a paid ad. The NFL app actually is really good in this way that I pay the subscription for NFL, and I can get all the primetime games through the app, and I get a selection of things. I can get the regular broadcast if it's CBS or Fox or whatever. But the real creme de la creme is if you get the radio broadcast, and the guys who do play-by-play on the radio, it's awesome. They tell you that, Brock Purdy's lining up in the shotgun. He's got Christian McCaffrey to his right, and it's like a 5-wide formation. They've got 2 wideouts over here. So, and they're speaking really fast, but you can put together an image in your head of what the offense looks like and then where the ball's moving and all that sort of stuff. I told my wife, the guys on TV do a really good job of after the fact. So they'll describe the play after it's happened. So I have to reverse engineer it in my mind of, must be what had happened. But you still get the excitement of whether it was a pick or whether it was a long pass or an exciting run or whatever else. I did go to the Texans game with a buddy of mine who was really good at giving here's what the setup is, here's what the play is. He was whispering to me as I was going. But the real way to do it is the radio broadcast. That goes for baseball and hockey too. The radio broadcast guys are just really incredible.
Well, Kevin Harlan, I don't know if you ever listened to him. He is a fraternity brother of mine from college. And he does a lot of the NFL games. And he is so descriptive. It's so much fun to listen to him. But
you should tell him I'll thank him on behalf of all blind people. Like, I don't think everyone who does play-by-play realizes what they're doing for blind people, but it is awesome.
Well, if you think about before TV, and this is before our time, but that's how people experienced sports if they didn't go to the games, was radio.
Right.
And they had to be descriptive. And so that's kind of the experience that you're getting. Do you have any final thoughts, Brad? I want to thank you, by the way, for being vulnerable, being available, and serving our country. Maybe the most important thing you've done is shown people that they can bounce back from disappointment and injury and all the things that we all deal with from time to time, and be a better version of ourselves, perhaps after something like that, than even before.
No, I totally agree with everything you just summed up. And let me just finish by saying I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to have shared this all with you and shared, my journey with your listeners and kind of be that model that I aspire to be for everyone that you're working with as well. So thank you very much.
You are welcome. For anybody out there listening that might want to find you and invite you to be a keynote speaker for their company or their organization or their convention, where can people find you?
I'm Brad Snyder USA on everything you might want to look for me on, Instagram or X or whatever else. And then my website's just bradsnyder.us, and that's probably the most common way people reach out to me for that in that regard. So I look forward to engaging with anybody who wants to, even if it's just to say, hey, I have a question about X, Y, or Z. I'd love to engage with you in that way. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Well, not everybody I have on has won 6 gold medals, and that's a tribute to your perseverance and to your athleticism and your commitment, your hard work, and really embracing the tough stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, well, you have a blessed day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Craig.
Hey, it's Craig Domann, the host of Pro Mindset Podcast. I want to thank you for listening or watching today's show. And you can catch us every week on the normal social media platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and all the listening podcast platforms. I hope you enjoyed today's show. And more importantly, I hope you gained a pro mindset insight. Please be sure to rate and review Pro Mindset Podcast. And I look forward to catching up with you on our next show.